Welcome to our next instalment of our IP Inclusive podcast. My name is Jodie Bates and I'm the IT trainer at Boult Wade Tennant. We are doing this podcast in celebration of the 10-year anniversary of IP Inclusive. I'm joined by my co-host, Max Waters.
Hi, Jodie. Hi, good to be back. I'm Max Walters, editor of Managing IP. We're an IP publication or IP and rankings publication that do a lot of work with IP firms and law firms' IP departments. And over the last few years, we've worked very closely with IP Inclusive. So happy to be part of these anniversary podcasts.
Our discussion today is about the menopause. So we're going to discuss how it affects people within the profession and what steps can be taken to support those going through it. I'm joined by Jane Wainwright and Burgato and Andrea Brewster. So the first question for today is there still a stigma around the topic? And do you feel people are reluctant to talk about it? And if so, why?
So I'm leading the IPause community. So that is the community from IP Inclusive that we set up to support those that are experiencing menopause and to support those that are supporting those experiencing menopause. Because there is a stigma about menopause. I think things are better than they have been. And I think we've got a lot to thank people like Davina McAlter for her publicity about her experiences with menopause. But I think that there is still a pretty big stigma around menopause within the workplace, especially. It feels like that there's an expectation, the kinds of ages that menopause starts to happen, kind of mid 40s onwards,
Mm.
that's when you're supposed to be at the best in whatever part of the profession you are in, and the most efficient and the most profitable if you're an attorney in private practice. And that's the point where you start getting symptoms, and you don't want to admit that, or a lot of people don't want to admit that they have symptoms and that
Mm.
that's affecting how well they can work. So yeah, there definitely is a stigma within society,
Mm.
but I think there is within our profession, as the IP profession more generally as well. I mean, Andrea, what's your
Mm.
experience?
Yeah, well, when I was going through it, I mean, there wasn't even as much awareness as there is now. It was talked about even less than it is now, and there was less awareness and understanding. So I went through a whole raft of symptoms, which I now know were menopause, but at the time I didn't. They were just horrid symptoms that I
Mm.
had to try and hide from the rest of the world because that's what you did. You got on with your job. And the main one that you hid from the rest of the world was that you weren't thinking straight anymore, that sort of brain fog thing and the inability to talk without losing your thread or losing the
Mm.
words for things. And I genuinely worried that I was getting early onset dementia because these
Yeah.
things weren't talked about. I didn't know there was a menopause related brain fog, and I just struggled on hoping people didn't notice. And so it's much nicer now that there's a better understanding and a bit of an enthusiasm to support people.
If you don't mind me asking, did you seek sort of GP advice or anything, or was it even the understanding was even in medical terms there was less of an understanding a few years ago,
Yeah, I
or did
think
you
less
sort
of
of
an
soldier on,
understanding
or
in
yeah,
medical terms,
yeah,
and other
yeah,
people have said this. I did seek
mm,
help for being totally miserably depressed. I was
mm,
already getting help for depression anyway, but
mm,
it seemed to be really, really bad at that point. But the doctors were happy to treat it as depression rather than to ask what might be causing the extra symptoms.
mm,
That was
mm,
kind of my introduction into the menopause space, was the mental health side. And
mm,
I suffered from PMDD, which is a very severe form of PMS. And so I was already being treated with antidepressants for that, to kind of tamp down those mood fluctuations. And for me, and this was 2022, so it's kind of
mm,
three years ago. Um, my kind of realization that it was menopause was partly because the mental health symptoms massively worsened.
mm,
but there were a few of the other kind of classical symptoms, night sweats and hot flushes, but not particularly. It was mostly the mental health, and I really struggled to get kind of a doctor's appointment in a
Mm.
timely fashion.
Yeah, I suppose they
So
think if you're walking and you're not in physical, you mentioned the flushes, but if you're not in severe physical pain, then
yeah,
you're not going to be a sort of priority perhaps for to be seen or yeah, or to work out what it could be.
yeah, and I think a lot of women kind of go through, like Andrea talked about, go through
Mm.
the kind of the ups and downs of the various symptoms and put them down to getting older or put them down to something else that they have, like in my case, mood swings in relation to the PMDD. And you kind of get on with it. And it's only when it becomes a lot more extreme, women
Mm.
have tended to go to seek help. And then there is a difficulty in getting time with GPs because it isn't you aren't at death's door.
Mm.
So it's harder to get appointments. I mean, I ended up paying to see a private gynecologist, which I could do within kind of 2 days of making a phone call
Sure.
to book in, and got
Mm.
a prescription for HRT, whereas I was going to have to wait 5 or 6 weeks to see my GP and not necessarily get a
Get to
prescription for
yeah,
HRT. Um,
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting you said you saw a gynecologist because if I was thinking I needed help, if I then start displaying symptoms, I wouldn't know and I know everyone's symptoms are different and different severities. I know my mum's was mental health and she kept complaining about sweats and she suffers with migraines like I do. And she was saying that her migraines and she's struggling to control them now going through the menopause. But yeah, it's interesting that you say see a gynecologist because other women that listen to this that will be experiencing menopause might say, "Oh, my only choice is my local GP," but there are
Mm.
other options out there.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, for me, I knew it was a gynecologist because I'd already had treatment for fibroids. So I knew that the gynecologist I had seen for that
Mm.
also specialized in menopause. So that was kind of
Oh,
almost like a coincidence that I knew who the right person to see was.
cool.
But yeah, I can absolutely see a lot of people wouldn't know who to speak to.
I think that's why it's so important to have these
Mm.
conversations and to get the word out there. I mean, you talk about the symptoms. All I was really vaguely aware of was hot flushes.
Same. Yeah.
Um, and it's only since I started working for IP Inclusive and attending the webinars and coffee mornings that IPause have put on that I've found out that there's this connection to mental health and all these other symptoms. And I don't know, I mean, I'd only heard about brain fog in terms of kind of nappy brain and when you're pregnant and after having a
Mm.
baby, that kind of brain fog. I didn't realize that he came back again.
I
But
had no idea there was
yeah.
a brain fog and a mental health element until Jane just said it 5 minutes ago, to be honest with you. So again, that shows you the importance of having these conversations. I mean, like you previously, Anne, I thought that hot flushes was the only really thing I'd ever heard of vaguely
Yeah.
connected with it. But yeah, I mean, I suppose what's the sort of is there any common myths that can be sort of debunked? I mean, again, going back to my sort of ignorance on this, I also sort of assumed it was something that happened to women sort of after retirement sort of age or sort of leading up to that. But yeah, what Jane's shaking her head, I can see. So that's
Oh,
obviously another myth that needs to be debunked.
yeah, I mean, typically,
Mm.
people will start to experience the changes associated with menopause
Mm.
in their 40s or 50s,
Mm.
and it
Mm.
typically lasts around 10 years
Wow.
of the
Yeah.
changes in the hormones. But you can enter menopause in your 20s and 30s
Mm.
because you can have a very premature menopause, and that
Mm.
brings its own potential risks in terms of the hormones being wrong at
Mm.
points in your life when they would be expected to be different. So there's kind of osteoporosis risks with that goes with very premature, but it can also not start until you're kind of into your 60s. So there's a huge kind of gap as to where it can start and to how long it lasts. And I think the other
Mm.
myth, and that's just, I think both Andrea and Anne can kind of come in on this, and maybe you, Max, actually, in relation to your family,
Mm.
is not everybody suffers as much as everybody else. There's kind of 40 different symptoms
Mm,
associated with menopause, but not everybody gets all of them.
mm,
You get some, and some people won't experience any symptoms. It'll just happen, and it'll be really easy for them. So it's not the horrific experience that you kind of get the impression of
mm,
for everybody. It can be, but equally it can be very easy. So it's that myth of it's awful and
yeah.
shouldn't be talked about isn't true.
Does that create, or could that create? Obviously, it shouldn't, but I'm just thinking in terms of in the work environment. Say one person says to their manager or whatever, or their team, that they're really struggling with their symptoms, but then this person thinks, oh, but X person's also on my team and she's had no symptoms. So what's the problem? That is there a danger of that happening and people not being aware that there's just this huge spectrum of symptoms going from very severe symptoms to no symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
Mm,
that is where IPause and IP
mm,
Inclusive and the work we're doing is important because it's about support, but it's also about education.
mm, mm,
And true to IP Inclusive's remit, we support those that are experiencing, we support those that are supporting, and we support allies. And actually educating allies and educating those that are not yet there
mm,
over what's coming, or what could be coming and what support is available. I think that's a really important part. So somebody, yeah, if you're managing different people, but everybody you manage will experience something different. Your mother will experience something different. Your sister will experience
mm,
something different. Your partner will. It's about making sure that everybody is able to understand that it happens and
mm,
it's okay, and
mm,
everyone will get through it. And I think it's perhaps unique in the sense of the IP inclusive areas and communities in that everybody is impacted by it at
mm.
some point in their life, because if they will either go through it, they are going through it, or they have, or they will know at least one person, whether that's their
Yeah,
mother, the friend, a colleague. It affects everybody in some way.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jodie, you were saying earlier that your mother went through
Yes.
it, so obviously you had personal
Yeah.
experience there, and Anne, I think as well. You said you mentioned with your mother as well. So it's for me as well. My mum has experienced it. I know that it's obviously now been and gone. She's in her, I hope she won't mind me saying, she's in her early 70s. So yeah, but like I mentioned pre-recording that I had no idea that it was happening, and Jane said, or Andrea said as well, she may not have even known herself. Again, going back to sort of what little was known about it and the difference between symptoms. Knowing my mum, I suspect that even if she was feeling quite, severe symptoms, she probably would have not shown it to me and my sisters outwardly. But yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely eye-opening to hear all about it.
I wonder if it's a bit of a
Yeah.
generational thing because
Mm,
I wasn't
yeah.
aware of my mum going through it either.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's in her 80s now.
Mm,
Mm. And yeah, and it's only now as I'm kind of in my mid 40s and having these conversations, I'm actually going to her and saying, "Oh, did you experience this? What was
mm.
your experience?" And kind of trying to get an idea of
What was her experience?
well, hot flushes, night
Yeah.
sweats.
Mm,
She hasn't really mentioned anything about mental
yeah.
health side of things, but again, it's a generational thing that she doesn't talk about that at all anyway. But she did definitely experience symptoms, and she knew that that was menopause.
Mm,
Jodie.
It's with my mum. I sometimes get phone calls and she's crying on the phone. And I'm like, oh my God, who's died? And she's
mm,
like, no, I'm just really emotional. And I've got a 5-year-old daughter at home. And she's like,
mm,
I need to see Bella. I need to give her a cuddle. I know that's going to make it feel better. And I'm like,
mm,
well, so we're out doing something. And I then bring my daughter around to give her a cuddle. And I'm like, is everything all right? And she's like, no, I just needed a cuddle. She knows what she needs to make her feel better. But my mum's a single parent with 2 other children at home. So she doesn't
mm,
have another adult support for her to talk to offload.
Mm.
And she can always talk to me, but because I obviously at the age I am and I've not experienced menopause or any symptoms of menopause, I think I would try and sympathize and understand. But obviously, I think it's one of those things that you don't really fully understand until you've experienced it with either a partner at home or a close friend, colleague, family relation, or yourself. So you try and sympathize as much as you can. But yeah, the mood swings more on her. Sometimes they're a bit scary, but it's nice to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I didn't know anything about menopause until IP. I had the separate community for it. And to be honest, it's scary. I'm quite scared. I'm hoping I don't. Well, obviously, everyone goes through it. My nan went through it in her mid to late 30s, apparently. And my mum's only in her early 50s now. And I think she started going through it only a couple of years ago. So she's still going through it now. And she was taking HRT. And sometimes when she doesn't take it, because she's not been able to get to the GP to get a prescription, she comes off it. I don't know how dangerous that is. And then she's really like an emotional wreck for quite a few days. I get quite a few upset phone calls from her, or I don't hear from her for a few days, and I'm like, and she only lives across the road, and I'm like, are you okay? Still alive? And she said, oh, I've just been busy. So it's just making sure I check in, but it's different for obviously every person. But yeah, it's something that I'm quite dreading, to be to be honest. But it's nice to know that there's other people that have experienced it, and that there's other people that you can talk to.
I suppose, Jane, the idea behind the group is also to sort of alleviate those sort of fears about it, and to kind of help debunk some of the myths and provide support as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Jodie, don't be scared. It will happen.
Yeah.
But you won't necessarily get the symptoms that other people get, or if you get them, they're mild. But actually, what you can look at is that, and this, I mean, I'm saying it to you, Jodie, but it applies to everybody that's listening. If there hasn't got to that stage of life, you're already more aware than kind of people were 10 years ago, and people were 20, 30 years ago, about what possible symptoms are. And that there's help available, and there's HRT, there's antidepressants if it is mood swings is the particularly, and depression is particularly bad. There's lots of options out there to support yourself if you get those symptoms, and you won't necessarily. But I think one of the things, and maybe Andrea can talk about it, is actually there's light at the end of the tunnel, that you get through it and things can be a lot better.
Oh, right. No pressure. I'm supposed to say something positive at this point, am I? No, it is nice to look back and think, yeah, I mean, I've still got a few symptoms remaining, but those ones have gone. And also to know that they weren't the beginning of the end, in terms of, dementia is a big fear for a lot of people, I think, who go through the brain fog. And it's really lovely when you emerge from that and you realize, oh, I can still do my job. I can still talk. I can still express myself properly, which, when you work in intellectual property, that's a big part of your identity, being able to express yourself clearly. And losing that, however temporarily, that can be scary. It is lovely when you come out the other side. So that feels nice. But I tell you what, Jane, I mean, kudos to you and IPause, because the lists of resources and things that you've produced, and there's a resource document, but there's also the things that you teach through webinars and other events and things. That's going to be a huge help for people now. The awareness of things you can do from the point of view of lifestyle and nutrition, all the different supplements that you might turn to, lots of different techniques for tackling the things that I had nothing to help me with. So you can be positive now, a lot more positive, because there's so many different strategies out there, and IPause are helping to spread the word about those.
And one of the really nice things about working in IP and being in the IP profession, you can also see technologies coming through that are to help people in menopause, and that just seems really lovely as well. It ties into the profession that all our listeners are involved with. That it is that medical advances are not just about treating diseases, but actually about supporting people through phases of life, because that's what menopause is. It's just a phase of life for those that will experience menopause. And
Mm.
you probably hear me often saying those that experience menopause, because I think, and I caught myself nearly saying women, and I try
Mm.
not to say women because it isn't necessarily just women
Mm.
and those that identify
Right.
as women that will
Mm.
experience menopause. A trans man
Mm.
that was biologically born as a woman may well experience menopause symptoms.
Of course. Interesting. I mean, that sort of ties into my next question in a way about, knowing how to approach the topic with colleagues. I was particularly thinking of sort of younger colleagues and male colleagues. As a male, how would I approach the conversation with a female colleague? How could I be an ally? How can I be supportive? And also to what you said as well about trans men, someone who is identifying as a man but has been biologically a woman who it may still affect. How can people support? How can people provide support? How can they be a better ally?
I mean, my first thing is kind of education and awareness,
Mm.
because by understanding what the biological basis is, the kinds of symptoms
Mm.
that people can have, that's probably the best basis for allyship for
Mm.
this. It's difficult to approach somebody.
Mm.
I mean, whether they're a woman, a trans man, or anybody, just go, well, is that menopause? I mean,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is not an approach that is going to go down well, especially if it's somebody that's experiencing mood swings.
Mm-hmm.
Might need to duck if you did that.
So you sort of say, do you want some time off? I mean, you don't want to be condescending, do you? At the same time, it's
I think it's the way you would with
yeah.
mental health, with
Mm.
anything, that you
Yeah.
just kind of ask the question of, are you okay?
Are you okay? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and then they go fine, and you go, are you sure you're okay? You seem a
Mm.
little bit off your game,
Yeah.
not making a judgment, not diagnosing them, because it might be
Mm.
somebody that doesn't necessarily know that they're experiencing menopause, but just kind of inquiring as to their well-being. If they say that they're struggling with something, then yes, it's kind of the, do you need time off, or can we do anything to support that, and not kind of brick wall face
Yeah.
on bull in a china shop, because that's never going to go down well, as it wouldn't with anybody
Mm.
that might be suffering an illness or disability or experiencing some kind of inclusivity difference.
I think that tactful approach is key, isn't it? Because like you say, when you say, "Are you okay?" Are you really okay? I asked my colleagues every day, like, "How's it going? You all right?" They always, usually say, "Yeah, fine," standard, and then but just leave it. I never really. I'm guilty of it, and we probably should all sort of actually probe it, like, you sure? Like, anything you want to talk about, whatever. And they might just be the worst that can happen is they say no. You know.
That empathy is really
Mm,
important.
interesting.
Normally, you have to ask
Yeah.
someone 4 times on average if they're okay before they actually kind of give you an honest answer.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
four
Yeah.
times. It takes at least 3 to 4 times for you to say,
Yeah.
I'm okay. Because if you think about it, when you
Mm,
say, oh, you're right, you're like, yeah, yeah, I'm good. How are you? It's a natural response.
mm,
You have to ask actually quite a few times. But if I see someone in the office and I see that they look not themselves,
mm,
I do try and put them, regardless of who they are, whether they're my COO or a managing partner or an equity partner, I'll go in and say, oh, look, you look a bit not yourself.
mm.
And I have no issue with, but some people might not feel comfortable doing that. But then I wouldn't mind if someone said to me, look, you look a bit rubbish. Are you okay? That wouldn't bother me.
Doing it tactfully, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Maybe
that's
not
the
those. Maybe
stressful.
not those exact words, but
No, if someone said that to me, it wouldn't bother me, but I would be
yeah.
a bit more fine, not saying you look a bit poop today.
Don't think it'll bother me too much either. I'd probably say, yeah, I've got two children under 5. That's probably why I don't look
Oh, yeah.
100%, and I haven't slept in 6 months or 6 years, whatever it is. And yeah.
It's a little like that age-old saying to a woman with a large belly of, when's it due, and it turning out that they're not pregnant. So
Yeah.
we all know that that is a massive faux pas. So kind of use that level of judgment of
Mm.
the, are you okay?
Yeah.
how you don't quite look yourself, or and
Mm,
actually observation. An example I often use is if you're in a meeting with somebody that you know might be of the right kind of age, and you
mm,
see that they look a bit flustered or can't get their words out, or they often if someone has a hot flush, they go bright red,
mm,
and start sweating. You don't have to say anything, just open the window or turn the
yeah.
aircon up a little bit or
Mm,
suggest taking a break for 5 minutes so that
mm,
so you don't have to necessarily approach the person, but you can create the environment that makes them more comfortable.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the whole sort of other side to it, isn't it? The kind of approach where you don't outwardly say something, you just take steps to make sure that that person feels like they can operate effectively or feels comfortable
Yeah.
Yeah.
in the work environment. Yeah. Um, Interesting. So what's in the future, I suppose, for IP Pause? What's coming up? What's in the pipeline?
So we have our regular coffee pauses, so they're open to everybody just to come along and talk
Mm,
about menopause. And sometimes we have a theme, sometimes we don't. It's just
mm,
about coming along and getting support and giving support and just knowing that that's there. So they're every couple of months. So we've got more of those coming up in over the course of the autumn, and we are planning a event for men. Um,
okay. Yeah.
to help educate men in
Well,
an
I'd love
environment
to.
that
Yeah, I'd love to
is,
hear more
yeah,
about that. Yeah, or
yeah.
attend. And yeah, yeah.
So
Interesting.
very much
Yeah.
designed to educate and
Yeah.
to do it in an environment that men can come along and not feel like they're being watched by a whole load of women that think that they should do better, and um, so trying to make it a more comfortable experience for the men to in the profession to learn a little bit more. So and then yeah, and actually, if there are things that people want, listeners want from
Mm,
iPause, then get in touch. Tell us what you need, and that's what we'd like to do.
absolutely. And that sort of ties into what Andrea was saying on the previous podcast, about if you haven't heard it, obviously give it a listen about the mission of IP Inclusive is you respond to what people need and what the conversation is, isn't it, Andrea?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole of IP Inclusive is about what people want within the IP professions, and it's
Mm,
grown from that. It's grown from the ground up with input from all different angles, and that's why IPause started, because conversations started happening about menopause, and it became clear that these were interesting conversations and that there were people out there that wanted to know more or wanted more support. And so IPause was formed. No one had a grand plan at the beginning. We will have a
mm,
menopause support group. It didn't work like that. First, we
yeah.
had a working group, didn't we, Jane? It was quite informal.
Yeah.
And then it became a community when the need arose.
Excellent.
And thank you, Jane, for taking
Yeah,
on that community.
yeah.
You've done a fantastic job chairing it.
No, it's needed, and I think we've.
Mm,
I said earlier that people are at the peak of their careers when they will experience menopause symptoms, and um, professions throughout the world, not just the IP profession, lose really, really good people
mm,
because they leave. They can't cope. Their employers don't understand. So that support and understanding for the employers, for
mm.
individuals is why we exist. So
That's
even
sort
if
of
it saves one person from
yeah,
leaving,
exactly.
we've done something great.
And that's a known not side effect, I suppose, but a known kind of impact of it is that people leave. They don't see that they're getting the support that they need. So it's easier for them to, because you mentioned it can be up to 10 years, which is a good chunk of your life or your working life.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a real shame that's the sort of side effect of it. Um,
And
but
I think if
hopefully,
I can just
yeah.
mention in
Mm,
that context, often small forms of support and adjustment and understanding can make a
mm,
big difference to the way you can perform through these symptoms. Yes, it's 10 years, but it doesn't have to completely trash your career in that period. If the people around you are understanding and there are some basic support measures in place, then you can still perform at your best during that period. And that's important because, 10 years in terms of what you can contribute to a business, whether or not you leave at the end, those 10 years are also important. So let's do what we can to allow everyone to perform at their best throughout the menopause symptoms or the
mm.
perimenopause symptoms.
Definitely. Jodie, did you have any sort of final thoughts, or did anyone on the panel have any kind of anything they wanted to note or to mention?
The only thing I want to mention is as and when my time comes to experience this, I'm actually quite reassured that there's this group here. There will be support available to me. The only other time I've ever struggled something similar was after I had my daughter, where I had postnatal depression and I felt so alone and isolated. But obviously you're on maternity leave, you're only at home with your family. But this, obviously, you experience it when normally you're in and could potentially be in work. And it's nice to know that there are going to be people there that are understanding, that firms are doing things in place. So if I do need a day off or a bit of time off because I'm struggling and things need changing to accommodate me, it's actually set me at ease a little bit more. I'm not as scared.
There we go. This podcast has achieved something. We've reassured Jodie. Even if
Exactly.
even if we've done nothing else, we've reassured Jodie.
And you've educated me as well. So you've got a double win on this episode. Yeah. But that's been really great to hear from you, Jane, about the committee, and also to hear some personal experiences as well. It's been very eye-opening and yeah, worthwhile, I think. But yeah, thank you to you for sort of taking the time to discuss it with us, and Andrea and Jodie for sharing your thoughts as well.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.